When you see everyone. Okay, hello, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. I hope you all enjoyed your lunch break, and thank you all for coming back and being prepared nice and early for what promises to be a really interesting session this afternoon. We ended this morning's session with a conversation around sustainability principles, and now we're going to dig into a little bit more depth, including with some country examples of how these principles can be enacted and what's practically happening on the ground. I'm really delighted that yesterday, my name is Chris Vandome. I'm a senior research fellow at Chatham House. We're delighted to be partnering with the European Union, with the government of Slovenia, and with Bled Forum on this conference, and particularly to both the government and people of Slovenia for hosting us. Once again, we've been doing this for a number of years now. At the commercial session yesterday with a group of businesses, it was pointed out that Slovenia is a nation of engineers. And from a lot of the people that we spoke with yesterday at that session, and including around from the audience today, it's clear that there are a lot of people who come to this topic with a lot of practical knowledge and something to offer in the space of engineering. We also heard this morning in detail about how two key pillars of Slovenian foreign policy and its approach on Africa are around water and water protection and the right to water, and nature and forestry. And so that's where I think that this panel is really useful in that crossover, is the protection of the natural environment, the protection of water, and what's going on in Africa in a way that can be linked into where Slovenian priorities are. And so for me, this session really solidifies what we're talking about in this conference, linking these ideas. So I'm going to introduce the panel. I'm very happy to welcome, I'm not going to ask the questions in this order, but I'll introduce you down the line. To my right is Ms. Chantelle Moyo, who is an environmental lawyer and from the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, so a German foundation, but based on the continent. I'm from Zimbabwe originally, I believe. We have Ms. Justine Dzadzra, who's the acting director for the Environment Protection Authority from Ghana. You're most welcome. We have Mr. Uroš Herlec, who is a geologist from GEOMINECO from Slovenia. Thank you. And at the far end, we have Professor Mohammad Zakaria Aboudahab, who is a professor from the University of Mohammed V, Agdal, from Morocco. So thank you all very much. So I'm going to follow my panelists earlier and confirm I'm not on TikTok, but I am using my notes so I'm not wasting paper. So Justine, I'd like to start with you, please. And from your perspective, what do you consider to be the most effective recent advancements in supporting a more sustainable mining practices, such as the advancement of extractive technologies?
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'd like to situate, like you said, my submissions within the Ghanaian gold mining context. So whilst the extractors point to a range of minerals, and in Ghana, we have a range of minerals that we mine as well and process, I would like to concentrate primarily on gold, because for us in Ghana, we have a very long history of mining gold. Currently, it contributes about 90% to total mineral exports. And on the continent, we are the leading gold producer. And so it comes as no surprise that that has also come about with a lot of environmental impacts. The environment has suffered for this. And so where you have a growing demand globally for minerals, it's important that we look to incorporating very sustainable mining practices in our gold mining industry. That said, I'd want to start with water management, advanced water management, and I think for us the two key media which are very affected, water and land. So for advanced water management, I think you are going to talk about water in Ghana. So I wouldn't go into the details, but I think what's important to note is that we have moved to a place in Ghana where it's now a requirement for most of the large gold producing companies to put in place a water treatment plant, essentially to be able to treat water, to recycle water, to be able to, so that the demand for fresh water is reduced. And based on the differences in the oil and the ore types, the treatment options also differ, but we have very advanced technologies, reverse osmosis, we have membrane filtration. So I think he'll go into the details of it. I would like to, interestingly in Ghana, we also have small-scale mining, which is a very vibrant section, and that is the area where we have the most challenge. So in terms of water management, what we've introduced in recent times has been a three-pond system, very simple, and yet effective at, treating water for reuse. I would like to move on to the eco-friendly extraction methods. So we have global trends in processing mineral extraction. Now they are looking at in situ leaching, where you don't have to move the rock. For us still in Ghana, I think we are still going with, for most of the large-scale mines, still leaching using cyanide. And cyanide is very hazardous. But I think we still go with best global industry standards. So for cyanide management and for tailings management, so we would go with the International Cyanide Management Code. And then, so for us in Ghana, starting from the year 2010, it's a requirement now that every tailings storage facility is fully lined with an HDPE. Yes, and so now we also have some people also choosing paste tailings, which reduces the volume of water in the tailings. And these are some of the things that we have for cyanide management. We also have the use of biomining. So a clear example is the longest probably producing single mine in the world, the Obuasi mine. It's been in operation since 1897, except for a brief spell where they were under care and maintenance. And they started, because they have sulfide mineralization, they started off with the roasting of ores. And that, produces sulfur dioxide, acid rain, and then they had legacy issues because we have arsenic trioxide. Somewhere along the line, we realized that this wasn't the most viable option, sustainable option. So now they've moved to the biox, which is the use of microorganisms in leaching the gold. So that is more sustainable, and it's in use now. We also have in Ghana, I indicated that the small scale mining is very significant. It contributes 30%, up to 30% of the total gold production in Ghana. And when you consider that Ghana is the topmost producer on the continent, it means the sector is very critical to us. But interestingly, the sector uses about 80% or more of them use mercury in the extraction of small-scale gold mining. And so that is a huge threat. But we have also become signed onto and ratified the Minamata Convention. And the essence of the convention is to phase down and to phase out eventually the use of mercury in small-scale mining. And as a signatory there, we have prepared our national action plan, and we are working on phasing out mercury. So we've introduced mercury-free technologies in small-scale mining, and we are working on it. The next one I move to quickly is the land rehabilitation and ecological restoration. I must say we haven't done well. We've done a bit when it comes to land rehabilitation, ecological restoration not yet there. But interestingly, in Ghana, we have what we call the reclamation bonds. And so each company, we sign a reclamation security agreement with each company, and they post bonds, cash components of up to about 20% or 30%. The rest is in bank guarantees or insurance premiums. And then they put this in a fund set aside, even though they are supposed to do concurrent reclamation. In the event that they fail to do so, then we can take on this money and get people to do the reclamation. And I think, interestingly, in addition to this, I would like to indicate that there are some instances where we've gone beyond this need for reclamation bond posting. We have had companies, I wouldn't want to mention their names, we've required them as an agency to post reserve funds for instance, for creating pit lakes. So, in mining, it's not every pit you can backfill upon closure. Some will remain as pit lakes, some will be partially backfilled. And so they set aside an extra, we call a reserve fund, for the communities to be able to develop upon completion. And interestingly, we also have a biodiversity offset scheme. And currently, if you work within certain areas and you degrade the area, you're supposed to offset 3 times the area you've degraded. And we have a very interesting example of land rehabilitation, where we have an old TSF for one of our old mines, Golden Star Wassa. It's now under Shifen Gold, and the decommissioned TSF has been put to oil palm plantation, and it's received international certification. And it's a great example of what we can do with rehabilitated land. I would like to maybe mention very briefly community engagement. It's one of the sustainable mining practices, especially in our setting. So we have in Ghana about 6 major gold belts in Ghana. And so essentially, if you look at the map of Ghana, and the geological map of Ghana, everywhere it has some mineralization, if not for gold, for other minerals. And these are the same areas. So our mineralization is still coincident with forest reserves. They are coincident with water bodies. And they also coincident with areas where people live. And so when you need to, exploit these minerals, it comes at a cost. Oftentimes you have to resettle whole communities or parts of communities. You have to displace people, and they go through a whole range. So the community engagement has really moved along how we started. Now it's an ongoing thing across the project life cycle, and we would currently be engaging with community members regularly. Just a day before I left, we had 2 community stakeholder engagements with chiefs, with community people. They came, they had some concerns. We had to work with them to resolve some of these communities. I'll just touch briefly on waste reduction. I won't go into the details, but we have clear instances of reprocessing waste materials such as tailings into construction materials. Renewable energy integration, mining companies integrating, adopting cleaner technology, cleaner fuel sources, so that we have electric mining trucks being introduced. We have sustainable mining supply chains where companies are prioritizing responsible sourcing and local participation in this. And finally, we also have made some inroads in automation, in robotics. We have some mining companies now undertaking exploration, underground exploration using robots, blasting, and then drones are being employed for aerial surveys and for mapping. So these are some of the examples we have from Ghana.
Lovely, thank you very much. I think the point we're getting there is that as technology... Oh. Thank you. It seems a point there is, as technology advances, we also need the flexibility that regulation can also match that, and we're not in 1897 anymore. Also, on the point around research we might get to when we talk about international regulation, Ghana was the first African country to sign up for the voluntary principles on security and human rights, and other African countries are looking to it now as an example of the lessons that were learnt in Ghana for resettlement, which is important for European stakeholders as they are discussing their support for some of these wider initiatives. Uroš, I'm going to move on to you. I know that we're going to talk a bit later about your work in Ghana, and I know that there's a real strength of the relationship between Ghana and Slovenia, which is wonderful to see. But first off, at a high level, as a geologist, what do you see as the key geological considerations that impact how sustainability or how sustainably different materials can be extracted? And where are the examples of best practice for sustainable exploration and early stage development? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to put clear distinction between artisanal and small-scale mining and industrial mining. Actually, we need to take into account that actually in the modern and up-to-date mining, there are working about 7 million workers globally, while in artisanal and small-scale mining, there are 60 million of them. And this generally means that about the same number of families sustain on that income. So as we know that the biggest number of artisanal miners are in Africa, we can assume that actually 10 to 20% of the gross product of the income of the country comes from the artisanal mining, which is immense number, and the importance of that is crucial. What about the political influence on that? These people are actually, before the starting of the mining, more or less jobless. because there is not enough agricultural land, there are no jobs, and even some highly educated people cannot get the work in their profession. So this is some kind of social corrective, how to survive in spite of the fact that there are no other jobs available. So they need to improvise and go for that. So I need to make clear distinction about sustainability between industrial, because each industrial mine is based on feasibility studies which take into account all factors I'm going to list. While small-scale mining and artisanal mining does not have access to the proper geological data, to the expertise, to the machinery, proper up-to-date machinery, and we just need to say that there is a huge difference in recovery. The industrial processing should not go below 80% of recovery. Some companies in advanced international companies go above 95, 96% of recovery. While my experience in Mali, when I took 700 samples, was that the recovery was from 35 to 55% only. That is the result of the German Geological Institute for Rwanda on coltan. Coltan is a specific mineral. When you put pressure on grains of coltan, just explode. And there is production of very small fine grains which are mainly lost during the processing. That's why recovery of artisanals is from 22 to 28%. While the mine, which was opened recently by Slovene group, which was which I was part of, got recovery constantly above 85%. So my approach in the comparison of results is that artisanal and small-scale mining are spoiling the deposit. They are not using it sustainably. That's the main important reason. And because there is no plan of the mining, I call it chicken scratching. Sorry, but they mine it here, they mine it there, without a proper safety precaution, without proper plan. So quite often they undermine each other. There are accidents because of that, and there is complete lack of control. As far as I know, in Africa, mining inspectors are regular guests every week, even several times a week in the industrial projects. I like it. That's the proper way. Inspectors must control, inspector must be there. But nobody controls what's going on the field with in Galamseys or what's going on in the other artisanal or gold or other mining fields. That's a big problem. And whatever we see, the technology sometimes in some areas, it's almost the same as they have it in the time of Egyptian, with the pumpkins dried and emptied and use the wood to mine the alluvial sediments and then wash it out. And of course, with such kind of approach, without the knowledge, it's very difficult to expect good results. So artisanal mining has enormous potential. Artisanal mining is important and must be developed in a proper way, because this is the way how people are going to survive. Quite often some journalists are telling, but there are people, there are parts of men, also women working, and kids are working there. They should not work. Okay, should we let them hungry? No, they are there to survive. The artisanal mining, it's quite rarely profitable. Artisanal mining is mainly survival, pure survival. So we need to take that into account. And we need to account also the fact that actually there are big pressures of landlords who has money, who has means, machinery, to employ artisanal miners for a very low daily fee. And that means that actually these earnings are not properly shared between all people involved in artisanal mining. Mainly landlords are controlling that, and whole profits goes on. The only way to, I believe that also the state has something from the artisanal mining, it is legalization of the gold trade. Because most of the African countries have no control or very little control on the selling of the gold. That means taxes are not paid. And that means budget is empty, while there are huge health problems, where there are huge social problems and environmental problems. The area which is occupied by artisanal mining is 10 times, maybe sometimes 50 times bigger than the area of industrial mining. And what is the problem? If there is an ecological problem, it is actually focused in a small area and it is controllable. While in artisanal mining, it's widespread. You have remaining of mercury, because about 20 to 25% of mercury, when you do amalgamation of heavy concentrates, stays with the remaining minerals. It does not go with the gold. So it's pollution. And definitely, this is huge, huge problem. A part of the problem, health problem with the silicosis. Dry milling means that the release of the silica dust is inhaled into lungs, and lungs are damaged. This means that within 10, maybe 15 years, these people are going to suffocate. In the past, let's say in 60s, 70s, people, our miners, had such problems and they were dying with oxygen flask. But I have not seen oxygen flasks in artisanal fields in Africa, sorry. And the other thing is that after the silicosis, also tuberculosis is coming. Not to mention that cyanization, it's widespread. Let's say in Tanzania, there are 9,000 primary mining licenses and let's say at least 5,000 cyanization plants. But which means that there are the same number of tailings there, which are not protected. They are spoiling their water, they are spoiling their future. It's catastrophe. My heart is bleeding. So when we take into account the geological factors, of course, ore grade and deposit site is crucial. And we know that big companies does not go on the ore grade below 10 grams per ton. While we need to say that whatever they mine, they keep some kind of average, and they are trying to mine also lower grade ores, while artisanal miners are selectively mining and are taking only what's rich enough to earn. And they are left over the ore which is not profitable for them. And of course, that means that some ore which is due to the higher recovery profitable for industrial mining, it's not profitable for artisanal miners. This is a clear problem. So it's left there. And from my perspective, from my point of view, all tailings of artisanal miners need to be reprocessed. Reprocessed to extract the remaining part of metal. Another thing, multinational companies in Africa and worldwide do not get involved in mineral deposits of gold, for instance, which does not have more than 1 million ounces. This is 31 plus tons of gold. So there is plenty of space for niche miners with smaller capacities and with the good recovery. But we need also to know that quite soon the possibility for mining on the surface for artisanal miners is going to be finished. There are not going to be available such deposits anymore. So there is a crucial need to educate people, to open school of mining, to enable them, to give them knowledge to go underground. Okay.
Avi, oh.
Sorry?
It's okay.
Thank you, I will.
Well, thank you very much. We can. Yeah, a really important point, and I think wasn't made earlier on the higher extraction rates mean less material coming out of the ground, can limit the environmental damage from that process, and also opportunities for reprocessing and the need for protecting those workers as well. I mean, it's not just about protecting the asset; it's also about protecting the health and well-being of the people. So Chantelle, we're going to come to you now, and we mentioned a little bit both earlier this morning and after Justine's or in Justine's presentation, this interaction between national legislation and international guidance. And this is something that is being discussed within the European Union at the moment. It's something that is important for, for Slovenia in those engagements. And as Slovenia looks to Africa and looks to kind of positively engage on these issues. So what do you see as being the right balance between national legislation and international guidance when it comes to socio-environmental protection? Is there a need for flexibility, or do we need that kind of hard enforceable legislation from the outset? Please.
Thank you so much, Chris. I will start with what Uroš said. I think so far as international guidance and norms and balancing them with national legislation, in as much as we need, there's a sense of urgency around domesticating in most times, but in most instances, when you look at legislation, especially in Africa, we tend to just transport what international norms stipulate and try to work them into domestic legislation without considering issues around contextualizing what those norms are actually stipulating. And a perfect example that Uroš has already mentioned is one of child labor. When you look at international norms, child labor is a definite no-no. But when you've been into ASM communities, when you've been under the mines, and especially ASM mines, most of the children there are actually coming from child-headed families, right? So if they're not cleaning around or picking up some dirt, they're not going to eat, right? So I think there's a need for that particular balance. But before I get into the response to that question, I think it's also important to understand what international guidance and international norms are designed to do, and what legislation at a national level is also designed to do. So while international norms essentially help to set up aspirational benchmarks, as well as offering tools for implementation, especially for contemporary issues, child labor, responsible sourcing, sustainability imperatives, and the likes. So also, in terms of the guidance that it also provides guidance so far as learning and learning exchange is involved. In the mining sector, we talk about the water resource management, we talk about energy resource management, and etc. I'll give an example of a study that we did in Zimbabwe a couple of years ago on this. Whereas national legislation and international norms, before I conclude on the issue of international norms, they usually tend to provide some sort of technical scaffolding in the development of national legislation as well, to inform the direction in which national legislation is to take. So it essentially becomes a prophet in terms of what is to come and what national governments need to be thinking about in either the development of legislation or the reform of existing legislation. Now, national legislation in substance as well as in form, please excuse me, I come from a very academic background, so I'll move through this technical bit a bit fast. So national legislation essentially sets the standards and the norms at a country-specific level, right? So they provide legal clarity. They also, in essence, seek to retain sovereignty in a contextual and in a global context. So in conclusion, for national legislation, I would say that it is non-negotiable for core social and environmental protections, particularly for issues that have been mentioned, such as land rights, water usage, emissions, community, as well as consultation. Now, how do we strike the balance between the two? right? So I'll give you an example of in Zimbabwe in the mining sector. A couple of years ago, I think it was about 3 to 4 years ago, we did a study because I work in mining as well as in energy governance quite a lot. So we did a study, and the study actually sought to question whether mining companies are thinking about decarbonizing the sector, right? So this is 3-4 years ago. It's definitely after the Paris Agreement, definitely after the submission of the INDCs, and just after the submission of the NDCs, right? So when mining is singled out as one of the most energy-intensive sectors in the country, we wanted to ask mining companies, especially the formalized ones, if they have plans to decarbonize the sector. And I think Mekama mentioned it, are we going to mine sustainably in the future, or is mining inherently bad? So what we wanted to investigate that aspect from an energy governance perspective. And what we found was surprising, right? We have great environmental laws in Zimbabwe. They are entrenched in the constitution, but we have a very archaic mining legislation, right? But when we went to the ground, it was about 8 to 10 mining companies, which I won't, state what their names of those companies are. What we found was actually impressive, because not only did they have plans to transition into renewable energy sources for their mining activities, there were actually, many of them actually had solar panels. They had, solar was a huge part of the energy that they were consuming within the mines. And they had 5-year plans, they had 10-year plans to gradually decarbonize their operations. And guess what? There was no policy imperative, there was no legislation that said you must do this, right? So even if there was no legislative guidance and legislative mandate for them to do that, they were actually already, in essence, in their operations, observing what the national priority was so far as the decarbonization target. So I think in terms of that, I mean, that will also answer the question about whether we need hard law to somewhat enforce environmental protection. If you sit from an outside perspective, you'll definitely say yes. But when you start asking and start investigating how these mining companies are working, you would actually notice that in as much as we can sit here and say private sector doesn't want to participate, it never listens, it actually does. But the difference between private sector and us is we come and say what we are doing. Private sector usually just moves, does certain things, and says, listen, these are the imperatives that we need to be following, put in the plans, and they just move from there. So yeah.
Thank you very much. And a small plug for CAS, for Chantelle's organization, has been very active, particularly in Southern Africa, on conformity to CBAM and the upcoming CBAM regulations, obviously from European Union, as well as the point that you raised in your presentation there of national political accountability, and there's been a lot of work around the role of national governments and parliamentary oversight as well. So, small plug for your for your colleagues there. So Mohammed, turning to you, and we're going to start looking more and more at specific country case studies now. But at a high level, from your work in Morocco, what do you see as the 2 or 3 most important policy prescriptions to ensure social and environmentally sustainable development of the mining industry that encourage investment?
Thank you very much for inviting me to take part of this gathering. I'm happy to be in this beautiful country, beautiful city, around the forest and nature. Congratulations for Slovenia for its development, sustainable development. So, but allow me just to say that I'm going to switch to French because I haven't the same level of expertise in English than French. So it's a manner to make also French translator to work. I'm going to be brief to the point. So thank you very much. Alors, C'est bon? All persons has translation? Great. Je vais un peu être très synthétique. Véritablement, je ne suis pas venu ici pour faire l'apologie de ce que nous faisons au Maroc, puisque je pense que le point de départ, finalement, c'est de dire que parfois les ressources naturelles peuvent devenir une malédiction plus qu'une bénédiction. Et dans ce sens, depuis l'indépendance du Maroc en 1956, nous avons conclu qu'il faut compter sur nous-mêmes pour engager un développement durable qui protège la nature, les écosystèmes, etc. Et nous sommes conscients de la fragilité des systèmes, ça va de soi. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle, très longtemps, nous avons adhéré au concept de développement durable. D'ailleurs, notre roi actuel, quand il était prince héritier, avait pris part, entre autres, à la conférence de Rio de Janeiro en 1992, justement pour souligner l'intervention, l'adhésion du Maroc à ce paradigme dit écologique et adhérer à cette conscience universelle, parce que nous savons très bien que les droits de l'environnement, de façon générale, font partie des droits de la troisième génération, après les droits politiques et civils, après les droits économiques, socioculturels, et ce sont donc des droits de solidarité, c'est-à-dire leur réalisation nécessite l'intervention de plusieurs acteurs. Et c'est cela la démarche finalement du Maroc qui cherche à s'adosser à des dynamiques internationales consistant à protéger les écosystèmes. Je vous donne quelques indices très révélateurs à mon avis. Nous avons par exemple accueilli la COP 22, c'était en 2016 à Marrakech, et parallèlement, nous avions organisé une mini-COP qui a été dédiée d'abord à traiter d'un certain nombre de problématiques écologiques, environnementales au niveau de l'Afrique, on va dire l'Afrique subsaharienne, Congo, Niger, parmi nous, tout à l'heure, vous avez fait une belle intervention, pour également contribuer à résoudre des problématiques en termes de pays sahélo-sahariens, et puis aussi par ailleurs la question des îles, c'est important. Vous avez des pays qui sont menacés carrément de couler sous l'eau en raison du réchauffement du globe. Récemment, il y a 4 jours, au Maroc, et je ne sais pas si tous les pays maghrébins connaissent ce phénomène, il y a augmentation de pas moins de 15% de la chaleur en moyenne. C'est incroyable. Donc j'ai laissé la canicule derrière moi pour vous dire que c'est une question qui est très problématique, très complexe et qui nous renvoie à la nécessité, à chaque fois, de mettre à jour le paradigme consistant à protéger les écosystèmes. Nous avons également lancé une initiative très importante, à mon sens. Beaucoup de participants peut-être en ont une idée. C'est l'initiative dite 3A, adaptation de l'agriculture africaine au changement climatique. I don't know if we can use English mitigation of African agriculture, mais l'essentiel, c'est comment faire en sorte que l'agriculture soit durable, soit résiliente, résistante au changement climatique, mais en même temps qui puisse évidemment générer de l'emploi et en même temps contribuer à la réalisation de la sécurité alimentaire, car je le sais, récemment, on a célébré la journée de l'Afrique. En fait, c'est le 25 mai, mais comme c'était un dimanche, nous l'avons fêté chez nous le 26 mai. Et c'était l'occasion, encore une fois, de rappeler le paradigme de l'appropriation par le bas. Parce que finalement, si les acteurs de terrain ne s'approprient pas la question du développement durable et la protection de l'environnement, je crois que finalement, les politiques publiques, quelles qu'elles soient, ne sauraient atteindre tous les objectifs affichés. Ça, c'est extrêmement important. C'est la raison pour laquelle on parle du rôle des femmes, de la jeunesse, de la conscience en tant que telle, le rôle de l'éducation, parce qu'il y a des fondations qui travaillent sur ces questions-là. Sur le plan de la batterie institutionnelle et juridique que nous avons mis en place et ambitionnons précisément de donner au Maroc un certain maillage environnemental. Nous avons par exemple adopté la Charte de l'environnement et du développement durable, c'était en 2015, qui a introduit des principes très importants, y compris des principes européens comme le principe de précaution, le principe de la prévention, le principe de la responsabilité, le principe de la transparence, et en plus, nous avons exigé à ce qu'il y ait inclusion dans un certain nombre de lois, notamment en termes d'études d'impact, la dimension environnementale. C'est extrêmement important. Avant que la loi sorte et voie le jour, définitivement, il faut absolument qu'il y ait d'abord une sorte de simulation, étude d'impact, pour voir éventuellement quelles sont les conséquences de la loi sur l'environnement. Sur le plan institutionnel, notons que, entre autres choses, le Maroc, aujourd'hui, est devenu aussi l'un des pionniers en Afrique en matière du solaire. Et ça fait longtemps que, je pense depuis 2010, nous avons lancé un plan solaire marocain qui est adossé à la démarche européenne. C'est important parce que ça fait partie de la Méditerranée. Par exemple, nous avons une connexion électrique avec le Royaume-Uni. Dernièrement, en Espagne, Portugal, il y avait des pannes et justement le Maroc, à sa manière, a contribué à réalimenter en électricité l'Espagne, surtout le sud et le Portugal. Nous avons créé également Mazen. Alors Mazen, c'est Moroccan Agency for Renewable Energy. Initialement, elle était dédiée, cette agence, à l'énergie solaire. Et nous avons à Ouarzazate, notamment, donc c'est une oasis, pour ceux qui n'ont jamais visité le Maroc. C'est une promotion touristique, mais rapidement que je le fais. Nous avons Nour 1 et Nour 2. C'est l'une des plus grandes au niveau international, puisque nous avons 360 jours de soleil. Pourquoi ne pas profiter pour précisément générer de l'électricité, qui dit électricité, développement industriel, évidemment, tout en respectant le cahier de charges qui nous lie, entre autres, à des accords internationaux, comme l'accord de Paris de 2015, que nous avions ratifié et intégré dans notre corpus, bien entendu. Nous considérons également que la pêche maritime, par exemple, halieutique, devrait être faite selon des normes écologiques avérées, en exigeant, par exemple, le repos biologique, tout en allongeant les durées des prises et des captures, sachant bien, encore une fois, que c'est une problématique qui est atlantique et méditerranéenne, elle n'est pas seulement marocaine, comme les stocks chevauchants, par exemple. Et ça, c'est important dans le sens où, depuis pratiquement 2006, parce que nous sommes liés par des accords internationaux, nous avons introduit le concept de pêche responsable et durable, en allongeant la durée du repos biologique et en même temps en spécifiant les espèces à capturer en éliminant les espèces qui sont menacées de disparition. Nous avons également fait des efforts en termes d'hydrogène vert. Alors récemment, c'était, je pense, en mars 2025, c'est très récent, l'offre marocaine en matière d'hydrogène vert pratiquement est devenue une réalité. Il n'y a pas moins aujourd'hui de 14 milliards de dollars d'investissement avec des partenaires internationaux qui sont intéressés par cette offre marocaine puisque, évidemment, l'objectif, techniquement parlant, je ne suis pas un expert en la matière, mais comment on va séparer l'oxygène de l'hydrogène et en même temps produire pour décarboner, parce que les partenaires européens également nous exigent cette décarbonation. Par ailleurs aussi, comme le Maroc a été frappé de plein fouet par le changement climatique, notamment par des sécheresses à répétition, grâce à Sa Majesté, le roi Mohammed VI, nous avons introduit le concept des autoroutes en termes d'acheminement de l'eau et de péréquation interrégionale pour permettre aux régions excédentaires d'alimenter les régions déficitaires. Nous avons également augmenté la cadence de construction des barrages. Et puis il y a la question du dessalement de l'eau de mer, parce que nous n'avons pas d'autre choix que d'optimiser et de rationaliser, sachant bien qu'à Marrakech, nous avons un musée de l'eau, d'ailleurs, qui montre sur 100 ans, par exemple, l'évolution en termes de courbe des pluviométries. Eh bien, sachez que nous sommes aujourd'hui encore au Maroc dans un cycle de sécheresse qui, évidemment, impacte négativement la production agricole, etc., etc. Je peux vous parler d'autres minerais, cobalt, phosphate, etc. Mais le plus important aujourd'hui, moi, je crois que la conscience écologique marocaine, qu'on voudrait aussi partager avec nos partenaires africains en particulier, nous y croyons, c'est comment faire en sorte de considérer que les ressources renouvelables sont finalement la solution optimale pour atténuer les effets d'abord des sécheresses, du stress hydrique, bien entendu, les ressources naturelles ne sont pas inépuisables, ils ne sont pas ou elles ne sont pas intarissables. C'est une propriété commune et je pense que la sagesse indienne, tout à l'heure l'intervenant ce matin quand il est intervenu, dit une chose très intéressante qui constitue l'âme même du développement durable. Nous n'héritons pas la terre de nos ancêtres, mais nous l'empruntons de nos enfants. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle il est très important de cultiver la conscience écologique. Voilà, merci.
Mohammed, thank you very much. And really refreshing to hear there that the approach taken isn't just one of how do we mitigate the effects, it's one of what are the fundamental environmental rights that we believe should be the inheritance of the next generation and how do we protect those. Really important. And also another issue to raise that wasn't really raised this morning, which is of maritime governance. And of course, you know, the next part of the conversation. We're not discussing it here, but undersea mining, subsea mining is a huge thing that's coming up on the wider agenda of international debate. I think Sheila's done some podcasts around this, so you should listen to her podcast, and we won't dive into it here. But thank you for bringing that up. Now, I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper on some country case studies now. We only have half an hour, and I do want to get some questions. So we're going to rattle through just a couple of points per panelist. But Justine, yours and Uroš's presentations kind of talk to each other a little bit. And when he was talking before about the environmental management of the industry in Ghana, and I know that he's got some more points to raise on that in Ghana. So, but from your perspective, what is being done to ensure the balance of protecting the environment, but also allowing into the sector both industrial and the small-scale producers?
Thank you very much. So I think for us, I would say the fact that we serve under different ministries is a plus. So the Environmental Protection Agency, we under the Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology, and the Minerals Commission, they promote business in Ghana. They're under the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources. So every ministry is free to pursue its mandate. I think that's the first. So we are able to carry out our activities without much interference. Where there's need for collaboration, we do. And then when it comes to collaboration, I think we do very well, especially when it comes to the large-scale mining sector. So there's institutional collaboration. I serve currently for about 10 years now on what we call the Institutional Technical Committee for Mineral Titles. So what this committee does essentially is to have an institutional representation of all these stakeholder mining sector institutions, and they sit around the table. And the licenses, applications for mineral licenses, so starting from prospecting to actual mining, they come to us. And at that strategic level, we would make a decision on them. And so we get the chance as EPA to be able to make an input into it at that stage. Sometimes you don't have all the details which are necessary, so you go ahead and they can issue a mining license. Then there's a next stage where after you have acquired a mining license, it doesn't automatically give you the right to go into mining. Now you have to go to the other sector institutions and get the requisite approvals. So when you get a mining license for small scale, for large scale, either for exploration or for mining, you have to go to the EPA for an environmental permit. After you got the mining license, you go for an EPA permit. And this is the stage where we're going to put you, depending on your scale of undertaking, whether you're going through a full-blown EIA for the large-scale ones, or for the small-scale ones, I think you go through just a regular screening. After the EPA, you go to water resources, and then you get a water use permit. So that completes the circuit on the environment-related parts. Then you go back to the commission, the Minerals Commission, to what they call the Inspectorate Division. That is the operational division of the ministry for an operating permit. It's only with when you're in possession of an operating permit that you can actually now go and start mining. And so there's a hierarchy of licenses and permits that you need to acquire. And it's worked in them so that we have sufficient room for environmental protection. There's also something that I would want to touch on, which is so this works very well in the small scale sector. The collaboration within the large scale sector is very good. Within the small scale mining sector, same institutions, but the collaboration is somewhat different, because the requirements for even getting an environmental permit is not a full EIA from our side. And so, because at the time when we put in our legislative instrument, small scale was really in Ghana, was a small scale undertaking, what we refer to small scale mining. It was mining being done with small implements. Anybody who knows mining in Ghana since 2010 knows that with the introduction of technology, we have earth-moving machines. And so now actually in Ghana, the artisanal part of small-scale mining is virtually non-existent. So what you see very prominently in Ghana now is semi-mechanized and fully mechanized operations. So obviously, the industry has moved ahead of the laws, the legal provisions. And to correct that gap, we are currently reviewing these legislative instruments, which will allow for us to have better oversight over the small-scale mining sector as well. And one of the other novel things that we have within the sector is that we have what the Minerals Commission calls a mining cadastral administration system. It's an online permitting and processing system. And so it allows for now the EPA and the Water Resources Commission, which are the main stakeholder institutions, access onto this cadastral. So we can now tell that the Minerals Commission has issued a small-scale mining license to an individual or an entity. Previously, you wouldn't have that notification. And so if that person, because we have over 1,000 valid licenses as small-scale mining licenses. So if the entity doesn't come to you, it's difficult sometimes to tell they are in operation. Because as I indicated earlier, the whole of Ghana, 13 out of 16 regions, is open for small-scale mining, is open for mining. So sometimes it's difficult getting a grip on them. But this allows for us to be able to assess the system and to be able to follow up on the licenses which have been issued. I just want to talk very briefly about following up from what Uroš was talking about, and it's additional government interventions. So just briefly, it has to do with exploration of areas for small-scale mining. We refer to them as they are huge areas which are blocked out for small-scale mining. And I think Professor Hilson mentioned also that geological investigation is critical. And the cost of geological exploration is high. And so currently, government has some funds that they are doing this geological mapping over some of these blocked out areas with the Ghana Geological Survey Authority, with the Minerals Commission, are working on this. We also have some World Bank projects and some EU funds, which is allowing the government through the Minerals Commission also to do geologic investigation. And I just want to buttress what he said earlier in his presentation. So we have two ongoing projects that we run at EPA. One is the Planet Gold, and the other is the Africa Environmental Health and Pollution Management Program. Both of them have components which deal with mercury reductions and the introduction of mercury-free alternatives. In the selection of our sites, our pilot sites, we carried out geologic, some limited, not too extensive, but some limited geologic investigation. And the results were very interesting. So for both areas, we had alluvial deposits and then also had hard rock deposits. And we did an ore characterization of those two areas. And interestingly, what we found out was that with the methods that they use currently, they can only be able to recover just about 25% maximum of total gold. But then if you go ahead to that same ore, especially for the hard rock, to do cyanidation, you recover up to 95%. So just like he said, you realize that most of the small-scale miners, because they get some amount of gold, they don't maximize the recovery of the gold. And so what this pointed us to, even though as a country, we have our reasons why we do not promote largely small-scale mining in cyanidation in small-scale mining, as a project, we began to rethink and to look at the possibility of introducing centralized processing cyanide plants so that we can use them for processing ore from particular areas. So that just goes to underscore the importance of exploration. And then finally, we also have governments also embarking on investments in technologies, mercury-free technologies for the small-scale mining sector, and also working out flexible payment for companies to be able to get these mercury-free technologies to use on their mines. Thank you.
Okay, Justine, thank you. Yeah, and then love the point that you make at the beginning of the parallel systems of environmental licenses and permits and mining licenses. And I hope that someone who's involved in wider EU discussions on, critical minerals and the streamlining does come and ask you some questions and say, should we be streamlining everything, or do we need these dual systems for environmental protection? Uroš, Justine started talking about some of the areas that you've been working on as well, and please, I've already mentioned that you've been working on kind of improving water quality in gold production, and really keen to hear what you're finding and what your recommendations are.
The critical point at the extraction is the release of the processing water. Processing water is full of fine, because of the milling of fines, that means clay, which has a great surface and which attracts mercury, which attracts arsenic and other heavy metals which are toxic. And that means that rivers are loaded with fine material. That's why fishing communities are jobless. There is not fish anymore there. And that means that not only fishermen are without a job, also this food supply is missing in the country. That the only way to solve this is to control the release of the technical water. Needs to be formed the closed loop where sediment ponds of all these small releases of water is going to be concentrated, catched, cleaned, and reused again. And of course, the separate tailing ponds needs to be organized that the influence to the environment is not going to be so catastrophic. The other thing is that mercury, lead, and arsenic-loaded water influence the health of miners and their families. There was a strike, there was kind of a big event just before the last election in December in Ghana, when artisanal miners and non-governmental organizations demanded the change of the system and provision of drinking water in such areas. Such areas are highly populated. Sometimes one galamsey, one artisanal mining field can have 100,000 people. And you can imagine that it's very hard to supply clean and healthy water. So the only way is to organize it in a proper professional direction. How can be done? So technology exists, and in small pilot plants would need to be tested to remove the clay, to remove the sediment burden, and to also use the active carbon for as a trap for heavy metals, and distribute the water within specific part of the galamsey or the whole area of that. That's the only way. Of course, we need to know also that tailings needs to be concentrated. There is no management of tailings and artisanal fields. That means that you can find them everywhere. The only way to provide clean water is to organize them in some specific points where later can be reprocessed. So the combination of cleaning of processing water in a closed loop, identifying the clean water sources, and additionally clean them of excess of the clay and absorption of heavy metals is crucial for the future work and life being of the artisanal miners. Very short. There are some other ideas, but in short, how to get the money. Most of the product, most of the gold from artisanal fields is not legalized. Just goes into hidden channels abroad. That's why I like very much the move of the president of Ghana, Mohammad, who decided that actually it's forbidden to not to legalize it and not to sell it through the governmental institutions. That's how the budget can be full, and this money can be used also for the benefit of artisanal miners for the water provision. Thank you.
Thank you, Uroš. And Chantelle, we'll move swiftly on. And in your experience as a lawyer in Southern Africa, tell us something a little bit in brief. The challenge around enforcement, and what would you say is kind of the key to unlocking that challenge? A positive thing to move on.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So I'll just run through some of the issues so far as enforcement goes in the Southern African region. Give examples from Zimbabwe, South Africa, and Mozambique. So, one of the most pressing issues so far as implementation is concerned, especially when we come to environmental protection, is institutional weakness and capacity gaps, right? We're talking about under-resourced legislators, fragmented governance. I know we had a brilliant example from Ghana, but usually when you have more than one ministry that deals, especially in the mining sector, with licensing for water, enforcement in terms of water, air, energy qualities as well, when you have these overlapping mandates between ministries, it usually leads to gaps, in some instances, duplications, and if you're very unlucky, turf wars, right? Weak data systems as well, poor access to environmental and social data, such as, real-time emissions monitoring or community impact monitoring is also an issue. Then you have legal and judicial limitations. In some instances, you have outdated and inconsistent laws. In the case of Zimbabwe, we still have a mining legislation that is under review currently, but it's pretty archaic, it's very old, where in some instances you actually have to rely on environmental legislation to adjudicate some of the matters in the mining sector. We have slow legal processes, courts sometimes take longer to resolve environmental cases, and rulings are not always enforced. Civil society often complains about law fines, especially when we're looking at it from criminal sanctions. When a mining entity pollutes the river, they get issued with an injunction, they continue polluting, they are fined, and civil society usually complains that most of these fines are essentially a drop in the ocean for some of these large mining conglomerates. Community marginalization, I don't think I'm going to dwell on this, it's been said quite a lot, but I'll give you an example. We did a study, I think last year, on understanding environmental social impact assessments in 4 African countries. Then when we're doing interviews with one of their environmental management agencies, they gave us an example that an EIA was issued for a particular company, which shall remain nameless. So then there was a dispute on the issuance of this EIA, essentially. So they went back to the community and they say to the community, it's showing that you had a meeting here and this EIA was submitted with the minutes from this meeting, here are the registers. And apparently the community was like, no, but we were here on this day, but it was actually a health meeting. Then we saw people come, they asked us to sign a register, gave us food, and they disappeared, right? So instances like that and examples of instances like that impede enforcement. And I'll give examples, like in South Africa, for instance, you have very strong environmental laws, very strong institution to enforce the environmental laws, but the institutions are usually undercut by corruption, slow licensing processes, resource constraints within the DMRE, the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. In Mozambique, in the Cabo Delgado region, large-scale ANG projects often face criticisms on displacement as well as lack of transparency and weak community engagement. So the way forward really to enforce requirement, I would suggest 2 or 3 ideas, which is independent, well-funded regulatory institutions. It's imperative. If EPA is to ensure that it tracks the operation of a mine, or EMA in Zimbabwe tracks the operation of a mine. They need to have access to resources to keep going to that mine. You need environmental officers that will continuously go throughout the life cycle of the mine to monitor and document what is going on there so far as environmental protection is concerned. Transparent and accessible grievance mechanism. I'm a lawyer, and I know how much, when it comes to an opinion or appearance in courts, I know how much I charge, and it's not cheap, right? So if a community has a grievance, access to justice needs to be accessible. It needs to be readily available as well. We spoke a little about regionalization here in the morning, regional cooperation, as well as peer learning in terms of how countries in the Southern African region are enforcing environmental laws, an empowered civil society and legal support for communities also, and finally, digital tools for real-time monitoring as well as citizen engagement. AI in the mining sector, how far have we gone and how far we're willing to go to improve systems, especially so far as enforcement is concerned. Thank you, Chris.
Chantelle, thank you. Yeah, I can't afford you to represent me as my lawyer, but I think the important analogy there is often talked about at these events and rarely gets actually implemented, is the separation between the referee and the players. And that's that point that you were making there, separating the referee and the players and making sure that the referees are capacitated. The football analogy, they need linesmen, they need VAR, they need support, but they have to be separate. Mohammed, we'll end with you. And some of our colleagues have been reluctant to offer name and shame and point out bad examples. But I want to come to you and see if we can end on some good examples. So, from what you've been looking at either Morocco or elsewhere, where do you think that the good examples are and what can we learn?
Okay, I can just to give you an example concerning our citizens, because many years ago we have engaged the process to forbidden any use of, bag of plastic, for example. This is very important. We organize each year campaign to face again pollution of beach and sea. This is very important. And we have introduced also the principle of pollueur-payeur, etc. And I remarked that the recent years, citizens had introduced also photovoltaic panel. Photovoltaic panel? I think we are in the process to raise awareness about the vitality of using renewable energy. So, for example, we have collaborated with Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. I was many years in Berlin. I visited the headquarters of foundation, and we have collaborated also by organizing seminar with Konrad Adenauer from Turkey, from Lebanon. And now I think the strategy of Morocco is multi-directional. Okay, green hydrogen, green agriculture, solar energy, etc. But many hands make work lights. So we can't alone to reach all objectives. We should to collaborate in the process of regional integration and to make all persons able to appropriate the process. So we have, yes, top down, but we have bottom up. This is why we consider now protection of environment in general in Morocco the vital public policy. Thank you.
Mohammed, thank you. My 5-minute warning sign has been raised, but I want to give an opportunity for questions. So we'll take one or two. If anyone's got a pressing question, please do raise your hand. Otherwise, you'll have to catch the panel during the next break. But yes, we've got a question in the front row. And if someone else has one, just signal my... Okay, and then Eva on the side.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed. So we have spoken about small-scale artisanal mining. We have spoken about multinationals. What we haven't done is spoken about state-owned mining entities. And yet on the continent, there are some of the biggest investors. Now, I have to single out OCP in Morocco as one of the best-run state-owned entities worldwide and on the continent. That's just the fact. But also is an exception to the rule. I want to ask the panel, what is your position on the role of state-owned entities in your countries for setting an example for best practice in environmental practice? Thank you.
Sheila, thank you. We'll take Eva and then Gavin. So the lady on the end of the second row there.
Hello. Just, maybe Eva Marn from the Foreign Ministry. Just to add a little bit on this one, I haven't heard, and I know it's not totally the topic of this panel, but we've got two lawyers. And could anybody touch a little bit this ownership of the resources and how much in the past in Africa, maybe if I generalize a little bit, there's been numerous examples of how wealth was stolen in history, and why is it now, okay, environmental part I understand, and it was very, very well explained as well, and I know a lot of people are working on it, but the fact that there's a loss of value, the loss of asset or the value of the asset that goes somewhere else when the companies are foreign owned, as opposed to maybe state-owned or maybe small and other mining. That part is missing for me, because I think I don't see a big difference from before. So why would we trust investment more now as opposed to, I don't know, 50, 100 years ago? Thank you.
Good question, thank you. And Gavin.
Just a couple comments / questions. The first is, I guess collectively relates to sort of the problems that are sort of perceived as being associated with ASM in Africa. I think we need to sort of pump the brakes on mercury a bit, because we talk about the Planet Gold Project, and I don't want to bite the hand that feeds me. I'm heavily involved, but a lot of these solutions to mercury substitutes are not substitutes. Shaking tables, cyanide you mentioned, we don't have capacity in Ghana to integrate cyanide into the small-scale mining license. So there's a lot of things that need to be thought about. We mentioned child labor in Africa. We all know that this is a very, very gray area when it comes to children being at site. We've done a lot of research that shows that a lot of agricultural families are engaged in mining, and the kids are doing the same type of work that they're doing on the farm as they're doing at the mine site with their parents. So that's something that I wanted to clarify up front first. And secondly, I find this issue of institutional division as far as responsibilities for mine licenses go very interesting, because, and I'm somewhat undermining my own presentation here, but I'm sort of viewing formalization as it being what it is. We have to deal with it. Formalization was started up. The reason why we legalized small-scale mining in Africa was not because of any environmental pursuit. It was to stop smuggling. And when the small-scale gold mining law was instituted in Ghana in 1989, it was because gold was being smuggled from Togo. Togo doesn't have any gold mines. It was exporting gold, but it didn't have any gold mines. Same with Zimbabwe when they implemented the mining public streams regulations in 1991. Now the significance of this is, and I'll leave you with this, is that the EPA had not been established in Ghana then, and the EMA had not been established in Zimbabwe then, 1994 and 2003 respectively. So as we've seen over the years, and this is where I go back to my point on licenses and things being complicated, and in the case of Ghana, the Minerals Commission not talking to the EPA not talking to the Minerals Commission, et cetera, is that what are we trying to do with these licenses? Because unless you talk to one another, you're just going to be adding layers and layers and layers and layers onto what is already a complex bureaucracy when it comes to getting a license.
4 excellent questions, so we'll take another hour to answer those. Well, let's take Gavin's question on Ghana. Justine, why don't you take that, and then Uroš, you can take immediately after the question around kind of alternatives to mercury and so on. Can the technology really deliver?
Okay, so as I initially said, I think I mentioned it during my presentation that the position of EPA regarding the use of cyanide in the small-scale space was a no, because we know they lack the capacity and the requirements for cyanide management. They are strict, and we know they do not have the capital to do that. But based on what we have observed going on the field, we realize that virtually every region where there's hard rock, there's increased number of what we call the Burkina Faso technology, heap leaching. So they do it and they discharge their water right into streams, which is, it's a growing concern because it's alarming the rate at which these facilities are springing up in virtually every region. And so what we wanted to do with this project was to build a centralized one, a pilot, to pilot it within an area where we have a large concentration of the mines and give it to a third party to run. So these are not, even if we introduce this in the small-scale mining space, it's not going to be owned by small-scale miners because, for instance, even the validity of the permit, the security of the tenure, 5 years, renewable, you do not expect them to put in that investment. So that would be investment by a third party to run this according to the standards that we require. And I think that the issue about the collaboration, again, I indicated that we collaborate very well when it comes to large scale. We actually, even for the review of the EIAs, we call them EIAs, for the review of the EIAs, we have all these institutions included in the review of these documents. Minerals Commission, Water Resources, Forestry Commission. What we don't have, and that was lacking in the small scale sector, and that's why with the introduction of the MCAS, there's currently an upgrade of the existing MCAS, and now the EPA and the Water Resources are hooking their systems to this. So even though we may not meet physically as we do for the large scale, based on the numbers, we can meet online on a virtual platform. So it's like a one-stop shop, virtual one-stop shop, where we can go and process, and they can also come and process. So it's supposed to increase the level and to reduce the processing time as well. Yes, thank you.
If you want to get rid of mercury, we need to enable buying of the heavy mineral concentrate and provide technology of professionals who are going to do it. That's the only way that mercury is not going to be used anymore. So you need to establish the buying net and processing units for the heavy mineral concentrate with gold and pay the gold contained. Borax use, urea, thiosulfate, shaking tables are not the right solution. There is not enough knowledge, and this is just going to extend the problem, is going to make it longer.
When you hand it to Mohammed, so there's two you can pick from, legal ownership or SOEs as an example.
Yes, as I said before, we have adopted a law on impact study on the use of in any sector. Before to adopt definitively the law, we should absolutely to engage impact study, environmental impact. This is one. Secondly, we have, donc nous avons la charte de l'environnement and the sustainable development, ok? Nous avons le conseil de l'environnement comme nous avons le conseil de l'eau, water. Yes. Ok. Dans cette optique-là, je vous donne un exemple très concret que nous avions vécu l'année dernière. Last year, c'était une terrible année de sécheresse et par décision gouvernementale, les stations de lavage de voitures, par exemple, parce que moi je parle de l'or bleu, la ressource naturelle la plus précieuse au monde, ça c'est important, étaient obligés carrément de se mettre en chômage technique parce qu'il fallait optimiser l'usage de la ressource. Deuxièmement, alors au Maroc, nous avons ce qu'on appelle les bains morts. Vous savez, les bains morts, c'est quoi? Ce sont des bains collectifs, collective shower, ok, que nous avions hérité des Romains, parce que ce sont les Romains qui ont introduit cela, et quelques survivances existent à Volubilis, dans une ville vestige romain, étaient obligés carrément de travailler 3-4 jours sur 7, entre autres choses. Donc nous avons remarqué une adhésion des citoyens, même qui avaient compris quelque part qu'à un moment de difficulté, nous devons absolument éviter la déperdition. Autre chose, alors vous connaissez la pastèque? C'est un fruit qui est non pas budgétivore, mais qui consomme énormément d'eau. Nous avons été obligés, en termes d'agriculture aussi responsable, de stopper que ce soit l'arrosage ou encore l'utilisation de cette agriculture intensive en termes de consommation de l'eau, le melon aussi, etc. Ce sont normalement des cultures qui ne sont pas très adaptées au climat marocain parce que nous sommes semi-arides. Mais l'essentiel, je crois qu'aujourd'hui, le citoyen de façon générale, c'est que la protection de l'environnement est quelque chose de vital. It's not option, but it's a must. Yeah.
Chantelle, we can end with you again, either on legal ownership or anything to add. So if we could end with you either on the issue of legal ownership or again this issue of SOEs as an example setter.
Okay, thank you, Chris. National resource, nationalism of mineral resources is complicated, right? In most constitutions of, especially in Southern Africa, the government holds the mineral wealth on behalf of its citizens in trust, right? So it's perceived that the government will make decisions on behalf of the citizenry regarding natural resource management. Gold was stolen, big diamonds stolen back in the day. I think, you know, now we're talking about illicit financial flows in the mining sector, a tale as old as time. And I think it speaks to weak institutions in terms of enforcement of the laws. State-owned institutions, you know, especially in Southern Africa, you would know that there is a perception that state-owned institutions fail because they are essentially formed as a mechanism to siphon money out of the country. And that has been a notion. So it will be interesting to actually learn from Morocco and find out how they're doing it so far as it goes in not only in the mining sector, in aviation as well. We have a lot of challenges in Southern Africa. There's a huge shift and a huge drive for privatization, whether it's water resources, energy resources, and mineral resources. So something to definitely look into. Thank you so much, Chris.
Chantelle, thank you. And we're done on time. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's get our coffees, have a comfort break. Let's come back in 10 minutes' time for the final session, which is going to be one of the most important on resources and peace building. So enjoy your break, and let's thank the panel in the customary manner. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes, it's a pleasure. I've done all the work for you. Yeah. No, it's part of, we've got this big paper on traceability, so I just sent to you. And I needed to cheat, I needed to include like the CBAM as a reason why you need traceability. And I needed a quick fix of like some African discussion around CBAM, and so I used the stuff that you did. So I just ripped all of that and just like if you want to know about CBAM in Africa, Cass had done the work, it's all here, and I moved on. Yeah, just fly back. Yeah. Stuff like also because the European Union try and work with people on the ideals that sit behind the cause for the regulation. All they do is they have this extraterritorial regulation that they then just walk around the world and say, oh, by the way, we've passed this, so you've now got to do this. Rather than going around the world saying, hey guys, we want to achieve this. Like, we want to achieve this. We've set this up for ourselves. Like, how can you help us achieve what we want to do? And like, just that change of tone would be so important.
A lot of discussion
Sedela. Tukih pa ni več, evo, smo zrihtali. Kak sem jaz to zrihtal, a? Dvojka. Ti imaš enko? Ja. Dela, vse dela.
Sam še skozi pokaže ikonco tam.
Ne kaže več.
Ja, tam.
Hello, do we hear each other? Ian and Cecile?
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
Yes.
good.
Good afternoon.
Okay, good, perfect. Okay, just to be sure that we have you online. Good, okay. We will show you when announced, we will show you on the screen, okay?
Great. Just a quick question in terms of
Sure.
sharing presentations. Can we share the screen?
Yes, sure. Try.
Okay.
Just try. Can you
Yeah.
try? Yeah.
Just try a sec.
At the lower part, you have a share green button. Yeah, correct.
It works? Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah, can you put it to the full screen?
Yeah, I do that.
And don't forget to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You either go to slideshow at the top or at the bottom where the plus and minus is when you enlarge the picture. There's a small icon of presentation. No, slideshow, correct, and from the beginning, correct, yeah. Okay. Would it be possible to do that first before sharing? Okay, are you using two screens or one screen?
Two screen, that's fine. I
Okay,
have it on the full screen, but I stopped sharing for now.
Then just put it to the full screen and then share. Can we do that? Can we try that? Yeah, so that we don't see icons and that we immediately. Perfect. Yeah.
Perfect.
Good.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay.
So just make sure that you share the correct screen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
one that you have presentation in full screen. Good. Okay.
That works.
Ian, do you have any presentation, perhaps?
No, actually, I'm quite averse to worried about the bandwidth, so I'm going to speak off cuff, because otherwise,
Okay,
yeah.
good. Okay, in case that you hear, I mean, that we are going to get audio drop, just shut down the video. Perhaps at the beginning be with the video, but if there is going to be a lot of audio drops, either, I mean, would be better that you just cut the video then. Okay?
Excellent.
Good. Okay,
Thanks.
thank you very much. Okay,
Right, cheers.
good. Yeah.